This is one of over 500 assisted PNF stretching demonstrations that can be found as part of my 80 Days to Your Dream Body course, which is available to my channel members. If you'd like to see all of them, then consider becoming a member. But for right now, let's get our stretch on. And while we're resting, we are going to continue with our assisted PNF stretching demonstration at the glenohumeral joint. And now we're going to transition into the medial shoulder rotators. So for this particular stretch, we are going to be emphasizing the subscapularis. With regard to the positioning, we have a couple of different options available, but what you want to do is we want to take the patient into 90 degrees of coronal abduction. So we want 90 degrees so that the humerus is perpendicular to the spine or the axial body. What we want to do is once we have the patient at that 90 degrees of coronal abduction, we have a couple of different hand options available. The first option is we could go one hand at the distal humerus, one hand at the distal radius and ulna, and then we would go ahead and take them into rotation this way. So we could traction up, rotate the body. I'm not a huge fan of this method because with this method right over here, again, you're going to have a gap between yourself and the patient. So they're going to feel a lot less stable. They're going to be rolling around. And because they're less stable, they're going to be guarding and you're not going to be able to get into a deeper stretch. So it would be preferable to take your greater trochanter of your femur and either just sit right next to them or just press up into their spine. That way we can lift and we can traction out. For myself, rather than using my hands, I like to use my body. And to use my body, I'm going to go elbow to elbow with the patient. This is going to be a lot more effective. And also, if you have a very large patient or somebody who's very strong, this is going to be more effective because you're going to be able to use your body's leverage as opposed to your muscles. So the way that I would do it is I would take the greater trochanter of my femur, sandwich it right at the scapula of the patient, and then I would go elbow to elbow with the patient, cup the hand over the bicep, place the other hand at the distal radius and ulna, and then from here, I would traction to create some space, and then I would rotate out. That way I could get a deep stretch in those medial shoulder rotators. And from here, I would instruct the patient to inhale and bring your palm forward. They're going to inhale, go into medial shoulder rotation, and then as they exhale and relax, I'm going to lift up in traction to create some space, and then I'm going to take them deep into lateral shoulder rotation at that 90-degree angle. When we are focusing on the medial shoulder rotators at 90 degrees of coronal abduction away from the midline, the main emphasis is going to be at the subscapularis. So that's the most stretch that we're going to be getting in this particular variation. Some other muscles that will be involved, we will be getting a decent amount of the pectoralis major, specifically the sternal attachment of the pectoralis major, and even more specifically, the intermediate or horizontally oriented fibers at that 90-degree angle. We will also be getting a little bit, not too much, of the latissimus dorsi because the pectoralis major and the latissimus dorsi, one of their actions is medial rotation. So when we take the patient into lateral shoulder rotation, we will be getting a little bit of the pectoralis major and the latissimus dorsi, and again, the intermediate fibers of that sternal attachment. Some other muscles, with regard to the anterior deltoid, we will be getting a little bit, but not quite as much in those as we would in those lower registers, because at 90 degrees of coronal abduction, one of the actions of the anterior deltoid is coronal abduction. So as we go more into abduction, it becomes more under slack. But it is a medial rotator, so we will be getting a little bit of the anterior deltoid in this position. Same thing with the teres major. With the teres major is responsible for medial rotation and also coronal adduction. So as we go into abduction, we're going to be getting some good stretch. And as we go into lateral rotation, we're going to be getting some good stretch. So for the teres major, we're getting a pretty decent stretch in this particular variation. Some other muscles, to a much lesser extent, we will be inadvertently targeting the coracobrachialis and the long head of the biceps brachii. Neither of those muscles are medial shoulder rotators. However, they are both shoulder flexors because they cross the shoulder joint anteriorly. So when we go into lateral rotation, we're placing tension on the anterior capsule of the joint at the shoulder joint. So indirectly, we will be targeting the long and short head of the biceps brachii the long head of the biceps brachii and the coracobrachialis. But again, the main emphasis in this particular stretch is going to be that subscapularis muscle. During the next rest period, now we're going to start transitioning and we're going to work into the flexors and extensors of the shoulder. But for right now, our rest period is up. Time for set number 4. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.